Welcome to Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And I'm Bill Stone. Well, tonight on Tales from SYL Ranch, we have the live Star Stream watch party for Stargirl Season 1, Episode 3, Wildcat. Now, while I wait for some people to show up, might as well explain my show for the benefit of new viewers, which statistically I should still have, although, amazingly enough, and I actually wasn't watching it very hard. I'm up to something like 330 viewers now, subs now, so that's awesome. Tell all your friends, family, neighbors, pets, and livestock about me. In any case, in general, Tales from SYL Ranch is a science fiction, fantasy, horror, comic book, and other genre-related review show. However, in the last several days, due to all of the terrorist attacks in all major American cities, and some people might call them protests, some might call them riots, but in fact they meet the textbook definition of terrorism, I have done some coverage of them, particularly where I live in Lincoln, Nebraska. Now, for those of my viewers who are coming for political or news videos, listen, I'm sorry I'm going to disappoint you tonight, but I will have an editorial about this whole freaking mess sometime tomorrow. And for those of the viewers who came for the science fiction and other genre stuff, well, don't worry. I'll still be doing them. Unfortunately, this whole terrorist situation seems to be something that requires my unique commentary. I hope you'll all hang around, as there will be plenty of content for all. And during live streams, I will take any and all comments, questions, and nasty remarks. I will respond to as many of my viewers as possible. You can tell me if I missed something, if I'm full of crap, or if I'm just an amazingly hoopy frood. In everything I do, I go into far more depth than any other YouTuber. Now, with pre-recorded videos, I don't just say whether I like a film or not. I go into the acting, the directing, the cinematography, the mechanics of making a film. And I can do this because a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I was once an actor, so I speak with a modicum of authority. Not as much as a modern working actor, never want to give that impression, but with some authority. As they often say, there's an old saying, those who can do and those who can't teach. And I guess that, my reviews are a little bit like teaching. But with both my news and commentary, you will get both a depth and a perspective that you don't get with any other YouTuber. And this is because I live in Lincoln, Nebraska, a city of about 340,000 and almost dead center of the continental United States, what the coasts, insultingly rather, call flyover country. But you get to hear from a perspective like mine and ours in this part of the country, rather than some blown-dried commentator on the coasts. I'm also a political libertarian, which generally means my views are very different from either liberals or conservatives. And after this show is over, I will take a general Q&A, and you can ask me anything that you want about any subject, whether it's genre, politics related, or anything else. So, if you have come to this video looking for a watch party for Stargirl, Season 1, Episode 3, Wildcat, you probably certainly hope that you don't mind if you're spoiled as you go along, but nevertheless, for safety's sake, we should issue a...
Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! All hands, prepare for incoming spoilers.
Yes, it is a spoiler alert, and that is because I am a Fandai master, and that means that the fandom is strong with me. And that means this is not a boast or a brag. This is just, unfortunately, where you find yourself after having watched, read, and listened to over 100 years worth of science fiction. The problem with Fandai Masters is that we are cursed. You just can't see new stuff without seeing the century that came before. You discover there's not that much that's actually original, and it interferes with your ability to enjoy things. But hopefully that won't be the case tonight. I can tell you that I am extremely, extremely familiar with the Stargirl source material. So I can tell you whether or not it's following it, where it breaks, because it has to, for a variety of reasons. We're talking about a superhero team, the Justice Society of America, that existed in the 1940s. So there are going to be liberties that they have to take. but I know all of the backstory. I am a big, giant fan of the Justice Society and what was called Earth 2 prior to the Crisis on Infinite Earths in 1985 that screwed it all up. But I'm still a big fan of the JSA, and I'm looking forward to this show because it looks like they're going to be sort of rebuilding a modern JSA with younger heroes, which will be interesting to see, and it'll be interesting to see how it is that they treat the source material, whether they're faithful to it or not, or whatever. But I can certainly tell you about it. So far, this show has been very good. I don't know what other reviewers are saying about it. Well, in fact, I do know what a couple of them are saying about it. I got to tell you, the couple that I know that are talking about it, I think they're just outrage reviewers. And those are reviewers who knee-jerk hate everything, even if it's any good, because their viewers want to watch them hate things. But it sets up a weird feedback loop between fans and popular reviewers, but eventually you can't enjoy anything whatsoever. And the couple of reviews I've seen on this, comparing Stargirl to Rey from Star Wars, I think is totally unfair. I don't think it's anything like that at all. And of course, I have a bit of a warm spot in my heart for Stargirl because it takes place. The superhero is located in Blue Valley, Nebraska, which I live in Lincoln, Nebraska. Now, Blue Valley is a fictional place, but if the show keeps being decent, I'm going to lobby the show's production staff to see if they don't want to, for an episode, send Stargirl down to do something in Lincoln. But we will see. They have so far been extremely kind to us. A lot of times this part of the country tends to be sort of butts of jokes, and people don't really understand what life is like here. And so when I see something like this that is A, treating us nicely, and B, doing a fairly good job of portraying small-town life in Nebraska or other similar states, I like it. I like it very much. I wish more people were doing it, but unfortunately, they're not. But I like this show on that basis alone. I don't think this character is like Rey in, Last of the Jedi or anything. This character has a lot to learn. She has flaws, unlike Rey, who was practically perfect in every way from day one. I don't know what her character arc even was, if Rey had one. But in any case, I think this show, we've got character arcs going on. I think we're going to find that one of the biggest ones for Courtney, Stargirl herself, is that, maybe she kind of is in over her head. And I think we're going to see some kind of journey with her father, Pat. So it'll be an interesting thing to see. They're eventually going to have some problems with Courtney and his mom, Pat's wife, because they haven't told them about this whole superhero thing ever. So we'll see. I think we've got something going on with Courtney that is wrong. I think she's thinking that Sylvester Pemberton, the very first Starman in this universe, is her father, and that's why the staff works for her. I think we're going to find out that's probably not true, and there is something else going on here, and will be interesting to see. But as I say, not a bad show in my opinion. Not a bad show at all. So, we are just kind of waiting around for the show to start here, and me just blathering on, hoping that it comes on. It's interesting because I'd been doing 20 fracking weeks of Batwoman, the modern-day Plan 9 from outer space, and that really was rather painful. But I've been doing 20 weeks worth of that, and to come in and have something like this, it's a good change of pace. Beyond that, I had gotten very used to the lead-in program for Batwoman, which was American Ninja Warrior or something like that. And now I'm getting Family Guy, so it's at least different. And I don't mind Family Guy. I'm not as huge a fan of Family Guy as I am, say, like South Park or something like that. But I don't mind it, and it doesn't irritate me in quite the same way because I have an eye for theatricality even when they're doing something like, American Ninja Warrior. I can tell when they've done stuff that explicitly makes their very small set look larger and all kinds of stuff like that. Anytime you see any kind of reality TV show, anything that claims to be reality, it ain't. It's not actually reality. Somebody, always remember, somebody's holding the camera and somebody's doing the editing. Excuse me. And that right alone makes it not reality. I'm much more happy with a show like Family Guy that doesn't even pretend to be real, it being a cartoon. But it's still a good show. Just don't like it as much as I probably like others. And again, we're about 5 minutes out, it looks like, from the episode starting. One thing that I may talk about as we go through here is some of the alerts that I'm seeing. Let me see here. Yeah, because I think I'm going to get alerts. The terrorist attacks have been ongoing for a week. There are some cities that still have them going right now. I've had them going for days. My God, Chicago, for example. During the end, at the Q&A, I'll maybe talk a little bit about how I know what they're saying is in the press is BS, and they're not covering this accurately. But it's been a weekend at least of terrorist activity all across the United States. Oh, about 4 minutes out now. Let me get the specific timing. Yep, about 3 minutes actually. So hopefully that we're 3 minutes out. I will tell you, the way that this always works is that they go to a local station identification after the commercial for the half-hour break. They go to a local station identification that's then followed by the network identification, which is followed by a DC logo, and then is followed by the episode. So I will call these out as we go along in case you're watching this later on demand and you want to be able to sync up with me, or for that matter, I'm sure there'll be some kind of delay, partly because I'm live streaming and that causes a delay. You can't even avoid that. Or the stream that I'm watching, it's on the Spectrum's streaming on the web browser, so that can also put us a little bit out of sync with each other. But again, if you're watching on demand, I will let you know what's going on here. So okay, we're coming up on what looks like the end credits, so hopefully this will go. Hey, Super Crew 63, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world. I happen to be where it's early evening, I guess it's almost 7 p.m., so it's evening. But I appreciate that. Hope things are going well with you. It's kind of a relief in some ways to not be doing stuff related to all of the terrorist activity that's going on around the country. Although, again, at the end of the show, if you want to ask me about those, I will go ahead and talk about it. As I said in the intro, I am in a position where it seems like these issues need my attention because I have different perspectives on it than you're going to hear from somewhere else. It's kind of weird because it muddies the brand, but I mean, if you look at somebody like Computing Forever, that user on YouTube, he does the same thing where he'll talk about genre stuff sometimes. He'll talk about politics other times. So I think we're going to see a little more politics in general, at least until all this terrorist activity is taken care of. And I don't know how you take care of it at this point. Every major and minor metro area in the country has terrorists sitting in it. So I'm not sure what the hell you do about it. I hope that it doesn't mean military action, but you can't be sure. When they're burning down cities, I mean, it starts to look attractive to the people who don't like you burning down cities. But anyhow, I waiting here. Looks like we got, can't tell the time on here. About a minute or so, hopefully, till the episode starts. We can never be quite too sure. Going to go ahead and kick up my volume so that perhaps you can hear it. Although last week I got a copyright strike because apparently I wasn't one song in it was just loud enough. that the copyright holder was able to grab it. I could, sit there and try to, fight it, but I found over time that there's just no point. If I ever get to a point where I am able to be monetized, then I'll probably fight it, but right now, what's the point? And Super Cruise 63 says, I am so sick of all the caca that is going on, looking forward to better times. Well, you're going to see going through my lower third today. Oh, here we are. We have the local station ID. And now the CW ID. And now the DC logo and the show. Blue Valley, Nebraska, 8 years ago. How's the fishing where I live? Well, it's okay. We don't have any really large bodies of water, to be honest. When you can find them, the fish are, not like stuff you can find on the coasts or anything like that. But they're okay. It's okay. I don't do a lot of fishing myself. But there are lakes and rivers and stuff, but it's not like a large body of water like it is on the coast somewhere. Let me guess. We're looking at Brainwave's wife? I guess I didn't catch who that was. Huh. I've got my subtitles on. And it did, I don't think it I wasn't watching closely. I don't think it translated. Because I can see that there's embedded subtitles. I don't know what that means. I think that might be Icicle, actually. I'm not sure. And he runs outside and gets picked up by aliens. Becomes the new Star-Lord. He's going to fix the country. Well, that'll be interesting. I wonder how he's going to fix it. Well, we at very least have a couple of supervillains here. God, I wish I'd remember for sure. I can't tell. I don't think it's Brainwave. He doesn't seem to have the same bone structure. It's just so hard. When you get skinny guys to play all the roles, they get sunken cheeks and sunken eyes, like the women do when they're too skinny. It's Icicle. Okay. So Icicle is going to save the country from Blue Valley, Nebraska. What are the odds? I'm so happy Stargirl is using a font that I can easily find. It's useful for putting on my artwork and stuff. So. And I have to be careful here. This might be something that'll get me. It wasn't a copyright strike that I got. It was a copyright reassignment. I could probably successfully get it. I know what's wrong. Hang on a sec. There. Hey, they just mentioned Lincoln, where I live. Awesome. Okay, so Blue Valley is apparently close enough to Lincoln. Cool. The fictional town of Blue Valley.
No, Mike, because fish sticks are. You can't even taste the fish.
Fish sticks are awesome. You can't even take the fish. That's great.
Seriously. You ready to go?
Don't drive me to school.
I wish they wouldn't talk about food. I'm really hungry right now.
Find the rest of the Injustice Society. They probably assumed new identities in Blue Valley like Brainwave did.
Okay, aren't you even a little scared of Brainwave? I mean, we both could have been killed.
But we weren't. And as crazy and insane as it was the first time since we moved to Blue Valley that I felt like I was in the right place. Like I finally know who I really am. Starman's daughter. Stargirl.
Court, even if there are other members of the ISA here, we need to proceed carefully, lay low, make a plan.
I have a 3-point plan. Find them, surprise them, kick their asses. We're Stargirl and Stripe.
Okay, being a superhero is not being one most of the time. I need to find out if Brainwave was alone or not. And I need for you to go to school and just act like a normal teenager.
That's boring.
It's safe. Text.
Yeah, I think we're into a very nice character arc here, as I mentioned in the intro. Unlike the sort of soap opera drama, we've got somebody here who thinks she's in charge of the world and is probably going to find out she's way over her head.
Eyes open. Remember, they could be anywhere or anyone.
Oh, that's right, they put Brainwave in the hospital last week. I kind of like this character, but I kind of like this character of Courtney Whitmore, but I really dislike when they did a decent job on her, but I dislike in the extreme anytime I see Jeff Johns' name. In general, right now, the guy is a complete hack. He created this character like 15, 20 years ago, so he has become a complete hack.
Check out my rising cartridge. Let's see it.
Ah, this guy, older guy, must be the wizard.
Yeah. Mind if I give you a pointer for your show?
Yeah, sure.
See, a magician's greatest tool isn't just his hands. It's distraction. Keep smiling. Keep them talking. Always look them in the eye. You do that, you don't see what's right in front of them.
Hey, wait, is your hat?
Magician always needs his hat.
You're great, thanks. Wonderful. See you. Okay.
Good luck.
Hope he's going to a show, because he's going to look really weird, and
Everything okay?
going to look really weird if he goes to school with that top hat on. That's the sort of thing that gets you teased and half beaten up all the time, so... That house, however, there are quite a lot of houses in Nebraska, even where I live, that are older homes that look just like that one he's in. And by the way, they don't cost that much. You can get a home like that generally, well, that's a little high end. You can generally get a very good home for about $250K. If you want to get one that's older, 100, 150K. It's not expensive around here. Yeah, and see, the only thing that's really...
You're new, right? What was your name again?
I'm Courtney Whitmore.
Joey Zarek. But my stage name is Zarek the Great.
I wonder if they're doing a
Pink card.
a play on DC's character from one of the very first ones they created in the 1930s called Zatara the Magician, because this guy's got a Z in his name. I may be doing it on purpose.
Boom. All right. Thanks for letting me practice on you, by the way. Today's the regional talent competition. Cindy and Ginny always win, though. It's Nebraska, so twerking still packs a punch.
What are you talking about? Twerking packs a punch everywhere.
Is this your card?
Yes? The seven of hearts? Oh my gosh, how'd you do that?
Need that for good luck.
Oh, hey.
You know, the thing that's very unrealistic about this show is Courtney is a pretty hot girl. I mean, look at the thumbnails that I'm putting up for this one.
Clean this right off.
But she's the hot girl. Guys at any school would be all over her like a cheap suit. And right into our first commercial break at 7-Eleven. I guess they're going to do it on the 10s and the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. This show actually airs for the first time last night on Mondays on DC's pay service. I had considered watching it there so that I knew what they were cutting, because the episode is, about an hour long there. Here, they're going to have to cut some things. So I've been kicking around the idea of watching it there, but then again, it means that I'm not having a real watch party with my viewers, so I probably won't keep doing it. I won't do that, and I may watch it afterwards just to see. They're real good at it. They're very good at taking out parts that don't seem to matter very much. You get like Doctor Who on the BBC, and it gets so irritating because if you know the actual episodes is aired on BBC America's cutting out 15 minutes randomly out of a freaking episode, and it's just annoying as hell if you know anything about the episode. They'll pull out bad things that were absolutely important. So, this show does a pretty good job of cutting out, not junk, but stuff that is not integral to the plot. Frankly, if they're doing any kind, I was told last week by one of my viewers that one thing that they took out from this was something about how the supervillains had some kind of plan. But we kind of got that already to this week. I mean, that exposition we had with Icicle's dying wife, that was enough exposition. We don't need to see anybody else having that conversation. So, as I say, they do a real good job of only cutting out those things that are not terrifyingly important to a given episode. And they're not putting us in with any of that soap opera crap, which certainly makes me happy. They could do it easily by having Courtney involved with somebody at school, but I guess if you're going to be unrealistic and not have the hot girl constantly be chased by every guy, okay, I'm actually kind of okay with that. It's unrealistic, but I'm okay with it because so far it means we don't get to, like on all the other CW shows, just pull the brakes and stop all of the action to talk about things for, 5 minutes or more out of the only 40 minutes that they have. But Supergirl 63, as I said, in terms of fishing, it's a little bit different here than it is like on the coasts and stuff. Are we back, or is this... Can't tell if it's a commercial or if we're back. Must be back. Okay.
Can I help you?
Oh, hi. Yeah, I'm just an old friend of Dr. King's, or Henry, and I heard about what happened.
Seizure. It's horrible. Henry's the cornerstone of this institution.
I'm sure that he is. Well, where'd they find him?
Just outside the emergency entrance.
Right. So what did he have on?
His lab coat.
Right. Of course. Well, here's hoping he gets well soon.
Excuse me, Dr. Chapel, do you have a moment?
Dr. Chapel. I keep wondering if that isn't a nod to Star Trek. I keep wondering if the Dr. Chapel references aren't a reference to Star Trek.
He's not alone.
Well, he's right. I'm just not sure how he knows that, but if the Injustice Society came there like 10 years ago or more
He came to see me.
whenever Pat showed up in Blue Valley looking for them.
His son was attacked by someone using Starman's staff.
Depending on the size of Blue Valley, that may be hard to miss.
He did.
When you get into very small towns, everybody knows each other. Certainly not where I live, there's too many people, but in small towns I've lived in, a lot of people, everybody knows each other. I don't know, this doesn't seem to be that small, so... Oops, sorry about that.
What did Brainwave tell you about this new Starman? It was a girl. That he'd take care of her. You were the one who was supposed to handle things in my absence. Well, he was insistent, and you were hesitant. You always have been. Brainwave has never been a team player like me. I was the one who cleaned everything up. Got him to the hospital. Took care of the costume. Came up with a story. William. You stumbled into your powers.
Huh. On my end, the sound for this episode just suddenly changed. Maybe they went to an ADR or something. I don't know.
Much more, but instead of thinking big, you just continue to think small. Even now, you're still performing the same old tired show. You just changed one stage for another. You spend your days making promises to people, but much like every politician, you don't keep them. The same way you didn't keep your promise to me.
Much like every politician, you don't keep your promises.
Comes from other people's perception of you. From recognition or applause, but that's not true power. No, William, true power doesn't need to be seen. I've traveled across this country.
I remembered some of the real names of some of these Silver Age superheroes that...
And I did this because I too made a promise, William, to my wife, as she lay dying in my bed, that I would combat injustice. For our son. For everyone's children. There's nothing more important to me than mine.
This really is a pretty good show. This really is a pretty good show. We've got, tension building and them talking about fighting injustice, even though they're the Injustice Society, so their notions about what's justice are probably very different.
I want it to be yours too.
Project New America.
But I'm back in charge now.
Kind of getting that now.
I'll take care of this Stargirl.
One we don't need. Yeah, it's interesting because the mecha suit bears a strong resemblance to, what I remember is it was probably the giant robot, that I remember a CGI or animated thing.
What am I supposed to do in my room without my games? I was in the middle of real important work, Mike, and when I was your age, we weren't playing games in class.
Yeah, back in your day, you didn't have any video games.
See? That's where you're wrong. It was actually the golden age of video games, and I was down at the arcade playing Asteroids, Donkey Kong, Big Dog Defender, Spy Hunter, you name it.
Guess he's about my age,
It was made by the
although his hair is not falling out like mine is.
Atari.
A what?
The game was called Paperboy, Mike, and I
He's talking about games I actually remember.
He said,
You were done.
he said, son, you need to stop feeding quarters into that machine and go make some money of your own. You like this game, Paperboy? How about you try the real thing? So we got me a paper route.
Does this story ever end? Does it just keep going on forever?
It continues. It doesn't have an ending. Because you, Mike Dugan, are going to take up that great family tradition.
Family tradition of a
Paper route.
paper route.
It's time for some
Okay, we're going back to the
Look, if your wireless
freaking 20-minute commercial. There are always so much commercials on live TV now. I've said it many times before. I am not used to those things. I am used to no commercials anywhere that I do anything because oftentimes I'm not watching it in a way that will give me commercials. So, but to be specific about fishing, there are a number of lakes that are in the general vicinity. They're not large. They're certainly not large lakes. You get into the Mississippi River, and a lot of the times, I think, I have Missouri River. I think, although I don't really have an experience with it, but I think you get stuff like catfish for the most part. I think there's wider varieties of fish in different when you get into some of the lakes. But, to be honest, I really couldn't talk about it. The only time that I really remember going fishing was with my father one time. And I was very young. The only thing I really remembered about it was I was bored stiff. I know we caught some stuff, and I know, bonding moment with your dad and all that. But it turns out, fishing just ain't my thing. I haven't got the patience to sit there all day long. But we do some of that. It's, if you want to find any kind of skiing, well, believe it or not, Nebraska is absolutely flat. You drive through it, and it's one of the most boring drives in the country. It's just flat and a lot of grass. It is a natural prairie. It's why cattle is a big deal in the state. But there is, believe it or not, on the road between Lincoln and Omaha, there is in fact a ski slope. I have never been to this ski slope. Partly because just not into skiing. I'm not into much of any kind of sporting activity, with the exception of marksmanship. But I'm just I every time I drive by that, and I've driven by it, I don't know how many times, driving from Lincoln to Omaha, or from here to Des Moines when I lived there, or from here to Chicagoland when I lived there. So every time I've driven past that for my entire life, I just go, where are you getting, the freaking downcline? I mean, there's no, it's so flat. I mean, yeah, when you get over by the Platte River, which is halfway between Lincoln and Omaha, the Platte River is often called a mile wide and an inch deep. It is not a deep river at all. But you get past that is where this ski thing is, and I'm just like, okay, all right, you have some additional stuff in the area that had been carved out when the last retreat of the glaciers were, but then you go, it's still not that high. It's not like Colorado. It's not like Boulder or anything like that. So I've just driven past it even in the wintertime. I'm like, where are they getting the hill large enough to do this? Apparently this is just for really novice skiers. If you really want to ski, and lots of people do, even here in Nebraska. If you really want to ski, they go to Denver, Boulder, Colorado. I'm sorry, not Denver, but Colorado, someplace, right along the Rockies there, where they actually have, decent-sized mountains that you can ski down. But Nebraska is very flat. And I think that's pretty well shown here there aren't a lot of trees except where you have people living, because nobody wanted to come here. The first people that came here as pioneers, we did not want to, and people who have houses, we don't want to have just grass. So we've planted tons and tons and tons of trees. I don't think you'll find a tree in an inhabited place in Nebraska that is any older than 150 years or so. So we don't have old growth trees and stuff like that. But you can tell. You can actually tell where the towns and the cities are because there's trees. There'll be nothing for a long time, and then you'll get to this area that's built up with trees, and you go, "Oh, town or city?" Omaha is so built up, so grown up with it that you can't. I tried to live stream it once, going through there so that people could see Omaha, but the trees are everywhere. You can't actually see it. So.
I made a promise once. Promise to someone very special to me that I would help make this country a better, safer place to raise our children. I've dedicated my life to that. Like many immigrants, my parents came to this great country in the hope of finding a better future to raise their children. But this past year, I have traveled across America, from town to town, and I have seen factories that are abandoned. I've met people in need.
Well, he certainly got that right this year, doesn't he?
Corner, Indiana, and so many other forgotten communities. And we're going to help them, just like we helped Blue Valley. We're going to rebuild America. One factory, and one town at a time.
Aside from being supervillains before, there's not a hell of a lot. It's not a hell of a lot that they're bad about so far.
Which will include a food co-op at 27 Spring Street.
They didn't look like they needed their downtown
308 Main Street.
messed with.
Is there a problem?
No, I'm sorry.
No, please, what were you going to say?
It's, I grew up here in Blue Valley. I just moved back. And what you've done to our town is amazing. It's remarkable and it's inspiring, and it's why I wanted to work here. But back when I was a kid, 308 Main Street was a theater. Every weekend we'd watch plays put on by our neighbors and our friends.
The theater has operated at a loss for years.
I'm sure it's not very lucrative, but it brought the community together. I'm sorry, I said too much.
You know what? That would be great for the community. Let's do that instead. But we have already said... As brilliant as you are, I'm sure you can find a way to make that work. Right, Stephen? Of course. Miss, I'm sorry, what was your name?
Barbara.
Barbara.
Well, I'm pretty sure he's going to figure out who Stargirl is now. There's not a lot of people that just moved in. That doesn't happen a hell of a lot in small towns in Nebraska.
Who painted that? Was it you? No.
Yeah.
You should have never dated Henry when you knew that I liked him. You are a nobody. I am somebody, and I'm never gonna let you forget that.
Sadly,
Even your own family.
this part of it, and I suppose it's probably true anywhere in the country, is accurate. You get cliques, you get, things that kids that are cruel to each other.
His head's going back like 50 years. Okay, well, nobody cares what you think, no girl. Okay, but really, I don't understand it. What? Don't you get it? You're only gonna make things worse for the both of us.
Usually the people who are left out of cliques, at least around here, cliques is they find other cliques, I was never very popular in school, but as an intellectual kind of kid, I found other intellectuals hanging out. Sure, everybody thought we were geeks and weirdos, but we had fun,
Mathematicians use three categories to describe practice.
Looters are saying they can't wait for the next George Floyd. Blazer 101 says, well, ain't surprised. After the show, let me put a pin in that, and after the show, I'm going to talk about it some. So.
Maybe.
I'm Courtney.
Cameron.
I know. I mean, I'm new here, so I'm trying to learn everyone's name. And since ours both started with C, it was easy to remember.
Welcome to Blue Valley, Courtney.
This is algebra, not the dating game.
That's a good line. What's the dating game? Yeah, because nobody who isn't like older like me is even going to remember the dating game. That was a good little line. Like that. That's a nice little line. By the way, Blazer 101, I mentioned at the in my 15 minutes before the episode starts. Generally, I'm doing stuff like this with science fiction, fantasy, so forth. But the stuff with the terrorist attacks is something that I just can't not talk about. I think I've got some opinions, and you're going to hear some tomorrow on a pre-recorded video that I think are a little different than most people's. So, yeah, okay. Here's also a thing about Nebraska, and we live in a band of the country from the Rockies all the way at least to Chicago. Oh, a star. Okay. I like the camera work. Reminds me some of Doom Patrol, and that may be normal because this show actually comes out of DC's streaming service rather than the friggin' idiots at WB or at CW and all that. So I guess AT&T now because they own them. But yeah, I don't remember where I was going. Oh well, I figured it out. But, I remember I was saying that there's stuff that I think I have to talk about with respect to these terrorist attacks. And that's the only thing you're ever going to hear me call them because it fits the dictionary definition of terrorism. In terms of, George Floyd, man was murdered. It's just that simple. The man was murdered. And I have lots and lots of sympathy for that. What I don't have sympathy for is going out and looting, committing arson, robbery, armed robbery. Let's see, what are the other stuff that they tend to do? Assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder of complete innocence. And I have a video out there that talks about some of this, and I had some footage that I took of one of the terrorist attacks here in my city. And I have a couple of viewers from that. I understand if you're not happy with my calling it a terrorist attack, but I have some viewers in there that have told me outright, they want all cops dead. And I'm just like, what's the end game here? What is it you actually want? And I don't think there's any straight answer about it other than just tearing everything down. Interestingly enough, Blazer 101, George Floyd, we had in Omaha, a city of about 1 million, I guess 2 days ago, there was a store owner who was protecting his store when a looter came at him. And he shot and killed him. And the police found it as justifiable, which obviously I think it was. Okay, we're back to ice. Does that mean that we're on the show? I guess so. It looks weird. Oh, it's an Alexa commercial. Okay. Wow, halfway through the episode already. That's the thing. It goes by pretty fast. That's a good indication that they're doing a good pace. They're not stopping like every CW show to just do soap opera. And what they're doing here, the drama that they're doing with the high school, as someone who was at the geek table every day for 3 years, it all rings very true to me. And there are lots of girls who call other girls sluts. It's not. You wouldn't be able to have that done on your locker by somebody without it causing a significant problem. So.
It's a message. I know it. It's Icicle. It has to be.
Hold on, just tell me exactly.
He killed my dad.
He killed Starman.
We have to go and find him.
And do what?
I'll get back to you in a sec, Superhero 63 at the next commercial. That's a long one to take.
You have no idea
So.
how dangerous he is, all right? The only thing I've ever seen hurt Icicle is the staff.
That's great.
That's terrible. Hey, Mike, what are you doing down here? I told you to wait in your room until dinner.
Yeah, well, my stomach says it's dinner.
Okay, well, I'm working on this vegan casserole.
Vegan casserole?
My reaction to vegan casserole? No thanks. I am not a vegan, never ever will be. A vegan casserole would not appeal to me.
Why don't you take this, ride your bike up to the store. I'm going to take these. You get yourself whatever you want, okay?
$20, awesome. Anything?
You got it. Anything you want. That's an advance on the paper route, okay? Be careful.
Well, I suppose you could probably find a paper route in a town that small. Depending on the size. I mean, the thing is, depending on how big it is, this fictional town of Blue Valley, Nebraska, depending on how big it is, you might not be able to find another paper route. Might just be that there's one kid on it, and you have to wait for him to sort of grow older and not be doing it. This is also something true to the source material. The mecha, Courtney did fly around on the back of the mecha with that.
Good. Maybe he's gone.
That's not an appropriate assumption to make. Her mask, by the way, is also extremely faithful to the source material. Extremely so. I've always wondered how that would look on somebody that's sort of half-face. And unlike in the comics, you can actually, if you look closely, you can see the thing that's keeping it on her head. I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, see, we got this bit of drama. This is an appropriate bit of drama and also draws from the source material. Because at first they didn't tell the mother or anybody else in the family that they were running around being superheroes. So they did have to bend the source material just a bit here, because if you didn't, there ain't enough crime in a small town like this. I mean, you know, the local police or the county sheriff are going to be able to take care of it, and mostly it's going to be like DUIs and stuff like that, domestic assaults. In a town this size, it would be unusual to have a murder, and you certainly wouldn't have any gang problems. So they're having to dink with the source material a little bit so that you can have a actual threat. So this is getting along here good. Eventually I'm going to be able to, after 3 weeks, probably next time I'm going to be able to actually get images in my thumbnails where Courtney is actually in action, because we've now had enough of those. Always wondered how that happened, whether those came back.
I'm doing this third best. I feel something. Like my magic's getting stronger.
Yeah, they're going to have like a Young Injustice Society and a Young Justice Society. Depending, that could work. But the episode name, if I'm not mistaken, is That river doesn't exist in Nebraska. That river just doesn't exist. Well, there are some lakes that have rivers that feed it, but that one is just way too wide. In Nebraska, and there's probably, we have trees around bodies of water like this. The rest of it is largely grass, because it's a natural prairie. This is actually sort of true to the source material, too. Pat was never all that brainy. Good engineer, but he needed somebody else to be telling him what to do, you know. The look of Icicle. Oh, wow. Oh, I bet the wizard, who's this kid's father, is going to be pretty pissed about that. And we'll put it over here, and I will take a look and see what Superhero 63 was saying. Weird thing, I was on the wrestling team and computer programming class. Wow, so you were a nerdy jock. Didn't really fit in with either group. Remember OSB Basic? I'm not sure what OSB Basic. Basic was the first computer language that I learned in the late 1970s. I guess it's the late 1970s because the Lincoln Public Schools had this big old mainframe. And we connected to it at 300 bits per second using acoustic modems. But that's when I learned BASIC. That was the first language I learned. And it was a lot messier than a lot of other language. Vegans eat the same thing my food eats. That's what you meant. Oh, okay. All right. I'm just not into that. We have something here in Nebraska that is a totally local dish. It is a completely local string of restaurant chain that outside of Nebraska doesn't exist, and that's Runza. And I like Runzas a lot. In fact, I'm likely going to go to the Runza Drive-In because they don't do the interior right now. The dining rooms are closed, but I'll probably go to the Drive-In after I'm done with this. I have a hankering for a Runza. But what they are is like meat and some vegetables and other things that are inside a it's not a bun, but it's a breaded thing that's around it. It's about this big and about this high, but I've only ever seen them in Nebraska. I have never seen them anywhere else. I know that the chain started here. I'm just surprised that they never tried going bigger, but only in Nebraska have I ever seen those. They used to serve them when I was a kid. They used to serve them at I'll sort of serve them for lunch in the public schools, although the ones they made in the public schools were nowhere near as good as the ones you can get from the restaurant. So, and it's basically drive-through food. The difference being is that unlike McDonald's has got that whole drive-through thing streamlined. You know, it takes about 5 freaking minutes at best. You know, I want this. Pull up to the first window, pay. Pull up to the second window, boom, there it is. This can take several minutes longer. I think it's just that they haven't figured out what the efficient way to do it is, and probably never will because it's been like that since I was a kid. But they've been around since forever, and I really do like them. When I lived in both Des Moines and Chicagoland, I would pick these up. I would buy, because you can buy them frozen. I would buy a dozen of them frozen and take them home and put them in the fridge and, in the freezer and eat them when I could. There's also another semi-delicacy that I have never seen elsewhere other than Nebraska. A little bit in Iowa. And that is the Twin Bing Candy Bar, which in the center of it has, I don't know what it is. It's supposedly some kind of sort of cherry flavor, surrounded by a big piece of chocolate that's got some nuts in it, real small. And then they put 2 of them together, hence the Twin Bing. They also don't have that outside of Nebraska, and I guess western Iowa. They are actually made by a company in Sioux City, which I also used to live in, so I got to see that. But these are the 2 delicacies that I have been unable to find anywhere outside of Nebraska. And if you're here and you see a Runza Drive-In, I would definitely suggest that you take a look at it. Our Tanamel says, is that a Ben Franklin hardware store? Haven't seen one since I was a kid. Yeah, me either. But this is behind me where I used to live. And I always put something behind me that it has some level of, relevance to what I'm watching or talking about. And this is, oh God, why am I blanking on the name? It is John Wayne's birthplace. White. God, I'm not blanking on it. I lived there for a year and a half, but it's a small town, and it's sort of a commute. It's a very, very, you could call it a very far western suburb of Des Moines. It's largely very, it's a lot of houses, and people just commute from there into Des Moines. I like the place because I was renting a 2-bedroom apartment for $525 with all of the utilities included except for water and, of course, the internet. Everything else, $525, 2-bedroom apartment. Wasn't small either. It's really cheap to live here. It's really cheap. Hey, Drop Tooth, how's that? Is this Stargirl? Yes, a DC New 52 derivative of the original JSA. No, not at all. Not at all. They're remaining somewhat truthful to the Golden Age source material, and they're also remaining kind of truthful to the modern age and what that involved. But they're doing a pretty good job. They have to adjust the source material. Justice Society of America was a 1940s team, really. And they've got some of the same characters and some of the same villains, but they've had to kind of switch it up a little bit just because, we're talking about 2020 as opposed to, 1940. So, Drop a Tooth. I recall the old JSA from the 1940s comic. I'm a huge fan of the JSA. I'm a huge fan of JSA and what became Earth 2. Hated when they merged those in the Crisis on Infinite Earths in 1985. Anyway, back to the show here. We're getting into Courtney's journey here, I think. It seems to me the character arc they're going to go for is probably that she's all headstrong, wants to do things, thinks she's in charge, but then discovers that these things, kind of like Spider-Man, that after he got to the MCU, that this is way bigger than he thinks, and maybe he's not ready for it. Maybe for her, the staff just isn't enough. But they did just have that actual death, and I think that was the Wizard's kid. And you'd probably remember him, Drop of Truth. He was one of the, JSA's consistent villain was the Wizard. I think that was his kid that just got killed.
It's the headquarters of the Justice Society of America.
Oh, cool. Oh, cool. I want to see this. Imagine they're probably going to have a big round table, and they're going to have, yep. Yeah, that's the Golden Age JSA table that actually said Justice Society of America right on it.
Each of the JSA members have abilities.
Wait a minute, that's Dr. Fate? Is that a picture of him?
Protect the world against people like Icicle.
Looks like it must, yeah, it's a picture of him as opposed to a bust, because Dr. Fate doesn't die. We're getting into the modern Wildcat, sure.
They made my big boy keychain. It's the closest thing you can find to a
Drop a Truth, yes, Marvel ripped off the Wizard as a villain for the Fantastic Four. Could be. I mean, there isn't much that's new in the world, and you always find people doing derivative stuff.
Power Man.
The Flash.
Our Man, yeah.
Dr. Fate. They were my friends.
Dr. Fate.
My family, really.
Dr. Fate is DC's answer to, well, not answer to, is the equivalent, basically, in some ways, of, Doctor Strange. But, of course, Dr. Fate came long before that in the 1940s.
Come here, that owl. You fly right to Dr. Midnight and land on his arm.
Dr. Midnight and his owl. Yeah.
He doesn't know Dr.
And the costumes are exactly the same.
I'm waiting for him for years.
I hope somebody's been feeding this owl. The JSA in this universe got killed basically by the Injustice Society of America at least 10 years ago. I'm not sure.
Icicle and the Injustice Society killed them all.
Bring back DC's Dr. Fate, the precursor of the Marvel Doctor Strange. And if you look at that too, the Starman, if you know about the comics, he is wearing the exact same costume that he wore later on when he in the comics when he called himself Skyman, which I thought was a dumb name.
Be a new Hour Man or a new Dr. Midnight.
Hour Man you could do because he got his power from taking a pill.
That's what you said about Starman, but
Dr. Midnight was blind and he wasn't blind, but he wasn't. Don't remember anymore. He had a pair of goggles. He could see very well in the dark. Yeah, Dr. Midnight was blind, but he could see in the dark. So he used things like smoke bombs, black smoke bombs, and stuff like that.
this stuff shouldn't be sitting here collecting dust. It should be in the hands of possible heroes.
Don't touch the Thunderbolt.
Uh-huh.
That's the most dangerous thing in here.
A pink pin?
Hey, will you just
Okay, see, Johnny Thunder's Thunderbolt.
in this room, it's dangerous.
With Johnny Thunder, he at first used to just say the words "say you," although it was a bastardized version of something that was in a different language. And then later on, much later on, in the modern Justice Society, there was a very young black kid who had the pen, and then he could call forth the Thunderbolt. The Thunderbolt was a sapient lightning, basically. So I do so like the JSA, and they're doing it. They're being as faithful to the source material as they can, given that the source material is so complicated over, since the 1940s, 80 years ish. So. Yep, and there's Johnny Thunder right over Courtney right now. That's great.
Man said to me the night he died.
I go back and get to you in a second. Drop of truth.
Come on, we're leaving. And until I say so, no more Stargirl and Stripe. Let's go.
I do find it so cool that they are being so faithful to the source material in terms of what the JSA was and that big table. The very first issue of not the very first issue, but the very first issue in which the Justice Society appeared. The cover has them sitting around that round table with Justice Society of America written on it, and then various superheroes sitting around the edges. They're, as I say, they're being as faithful to the source material as you can, given that the source material has had, 80 years worth of stories behind it. You just can't be 100% faithful to the source material. It's not possible. But they're doing very good. Drop of Suit said, the crisis on Infinite Earths and then the final crisis used the characters well. Then DC's New 52 changed it all again. Yeah, they have rebooted their universe so many times in the last, since 1985. They've rebooted the universe. They've fixed the universe because different comic book writers were not necessarily maintaining the same continuity, so they had to sort of reboot or fix so that the continuity actually made sense. DC, you guys are being run, and Jeff Johns, that hack, is running the show. Fire them. Fire them all, DC. Fire everyone working for you, and then hire me. AT&T, the rumor is that DC is one multi-book crossover from ceasing publication. That has never happened. Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman lived through the 1950s, which was when the bottom fell out for comic books. And if we're that close to ceasing publication, for God's sake, AT&T, fire these no-talent hacks and call me, because I actually have a plan for a multi-superhero universe that has, you know, a real arc that goes around it. And it could go on for years or even decades. That's the whole point. So, will they introduce the presence? Oh, have they introduced the original Jay Garrick Flash yet? All of the original Justice Society are dead. They were, with the exception of Pat, who is Stripe in this. But everybody else was killed by the Justice Society in Justice Society about 10 years before. But the Flash was there, and so was Hourman, Dr. Fate, all of those stuff. Drop Truth, DC Eagles Detective Comics. Yes, it was originally, way, way back in 1938. Yes, 39, I think.
I'm so sorry. Tell me it was an accident. What? Tell me you didn't kill my son.
Yeah, I thought he was the wizard. Yep.
I truly am. I know you loved your boy. But I wish you understood what I was doing was also for him.
I don't think you could get the wizard like that. He was an extraordinarily powerful supervillain. In fact, in Action Comics, much, much later after it was published, but the wizard was responsible for getting rid of Superman, you know. Okay. The imprinted subtitles are translating. Okay. Except for yeah, and Donka, yeah. So we got one guy.
Councilman William Zarek and his son were held in private this morning.
William Sarek.
His fatal heart attack is believed.
Oh, Zarek. Okay.
Learning of the tragic accident that took his son's life. Both were remembered by those who attended today.
Again, I think that's sort of a callback to the golden age of comics, because there was a superhero called Zatara who was a magician. So this Zarek, I suspect it's kind of a callback. Oh yeah, DC is still Detective Comics. Yeah, Marvel came out from the old Atlas Comics. Yeah, you're exactly right. I'm just saying it didn't. DC as a Detective Comics didn't really start until Batman came around. I think that was 1939 or something like that. Superman was 1938, and then they followed with Batman not long after that.
Not tonight, okay?
Okay, so where'd the mother go? Oh, coming up on the end here. So Brainwave is in the hospital with an aneurysm. They just killed Wizard's son and then the wizard. A lot of casualties from that Injustice Society. I'm a little surprised.
Got a memorial for Joey.
Not before dinner.
You okay?
This is weird.
Kid, Dad. Everyone liked him. Yeah. Come here.
I was wrong about the this episode's name. I was completely wrong. This is... I was wrong about the name of this one. I'm going to have to change the thumbnail when I get it back. This is called Icicle. Okay. I screwed up. That should be Icicle, which makes a lot more sense. I thought they were going to... The next episode is called Wildcat, and I thought they were going to show that. There's that big round table. Aha. Okay. Oh, Courtney's going in... Oh, my God. They're going to do Green Lantern? Oh, that would be cool. I mean, they did that terribly. And Dr. Midnight's mask. Oh, God, the pen. Just don't say the words "say you" around that. That could be...
Let's go do some recruiting.
Okay, all right. This is going to be kind of interesting. They're making a new Justice Society out of younger heroes. That's not without precedent. Let me see the next time.
Me too. It smells like gym class. You're such a natural at this.
Stargirl, new hit series next Tuesday.
So they're changing some genders too. I hope they don't go all SJW on us. So, but it is an entertaining show, in my opinion. I've seen reviewers on YouTube who have said it's crap, that Stargirl is too much like Ray. No, I really do find this kind of enjoyable. There's a lot of factors going into that maybe other people don't have. One is my extreme affinity for the Justice Society and the characters that were in there, and how I found the JSA in All-Star Comics in the 1970s when they started reprinting them. And they had some younger characters, some younger superheroes that had joined by then. They also had Superman. Like I say, on that Earth, they actually let those characters age. So Superman was gray at the temples and things like that. I just had a huge affinity for that. So that's part of why I like this. I'm looking, I go, oh, God, source material. They're really keeping close to the source material. Again, understanding that you're dealing with, 80 years worth of history, and there's no way to make that complex stuff. But if they get Green Lantern, because they had the Green Lantern, the Golden Age Green Lantern's, power battery, that could be cool. But next week they're going to recruit Wildcat. After that, IMDb does not have any episode names. And I was wrong about this one being Icicle, so I'm going to have to go back and change my my thumbnail on the show. I have a suggestion for Ruby Rose replacement. Oh, yeah. Yeah, thank God she's being replaced. She's a block of wood. Cara Delevingne, she's cute and lesbian. She's also a lousy actress. If you're talking about Ruby Rose, yeah, I don't know this other person that you're talking about there. But Ruby Rose, oh, God, I sat through 10 episodes of that. Most of them streamed because reviewing it was so painful. Batwoman really is, in many respects, the modern-day Plan 9 from outer space. Everybody on that thinks they're making really good art, and it sucks in almost every way. It's just like Plan 9, Ed Wood thought he was making an opus magnum, but it was terrible. It's only much later that we go, wow, that's a so bad it's good movie. So we will see who they replace Ruby Rose with. In my opinion, just about anybody would be a better choice as an actress. Kara is from the Luke Besson film Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. I've not seen that one. So, hey, you found one that the Van Dyke Master has not seen. But again, I have a lot of affinity for this, partly because they're staying pretty close to the source material as much as you can. And then, of course, this thing is set in a fictional town of Blue Valley, Nebraska. I live in Lincoln. In fact, they mentioned Lincoln today. So, yay. If this show continues to be entertaining, as I think it is, I'll be, sending emails and letters to the producer of this show. Hey, let Courtney come to Lincoln just for one episode to do something. Let me write it, because I know how to do that about Lincoln. So, Drop of Truth says, it's awful. Are you talking about Batwoman? Kate Kane was really a horrible person. Oh, God, Luke Fox shouldn't have had her arrested. Should have had her arrested. Oh, God, yes. Oh, yes. The stuff that Batwoman so far in the first season has done is totally selfish. She does not fight crime. I mean, we never see her just going after a mugger in an alley or something like that. Maybe once, But we've never seen her do that. All the crime fighting she's done is totally selfish, for totally selfish reasons, and it's all about her sister, and her sister is this multiple murderess, and Batwoman has let her go in that show repeatedly, which makes Batwoman an accessory to all of these murders. She knew where to find her. She knew that she was going to kill people. It's so dumb. It is really like the modern Plan 9 from outer space. It's really awful. When is my review of Colossus, the Foreman Project coming? I don't know at this point. And that's because we have had, and I'll just get into it, because we're now at a point where I would, in the show where I call Ask the Fandai Master. Valerian in the City of 1,000 Planets is awful. Okay, probably the worst effort by Luc Besson. I don't know, so I've not seen it. I do sometimes review pretty awful films. I reviewed Frankenstein 1970, which was shot in 1958, and it is, aside from things like So Bad They're Good. So Bad They're Good movies are fine. This is just terrible. It was terrible. Do not watch this movie. Do not ever watch this movie. When I reviewed it, I actually had to apologize to my viewers because some of them had watched it. It is the worst movie that I have yet to ever see, aside from, So Bad They're Good movies. It's just terrible. Am I safe from these ludicrous protests? They are not protests. They are not riots. They actually fit the textbook definition, look it up, of terrorism. We are engaged in a ton of terrorism. And if you look back, and it's a good time to get into it because I said at the beginning, and this is why I don't know when my reviews are going to be. Because of all this insanity, I've got things to say about it politically. It's going to be a different perspective than you generally hear from most people, partly because of where I live, partly because I'm a libertarian. But I'm going to have to, I feel compelled to talk about it. A couple of days ago, I went down to get footage of the riot occurring here. You can find it in the back. It's called, it's my last video, Lincoln, Nebraska terrorist attack. It's better than some places, but it's still utterly stupid and ridiculous. So, am I safe from it? Yes, as long as they don't go down to where they're having the riots, which is down at where City County building, which is really the headquarters for the police in Lincoln. So, like everything else that I've seen that people have said in the comments, the ones who are really for this, I think they just want all cops dead. I don't know that they have any other end game, and it's just ridiculous. Is it true that most of these terror are in Democrat-controlled areas? I wouldn't necessarily say that's so. I mean, I don't know now. I haven't kept on it because I only recently moved here. I don't remember whether our Lincoln mayor is a Democrat. Typically the state goes pretty red with almost all of the politicians. What we're seeing here is just a level of stupid that I can't believe. Do I have to do any introduction on this? No. I just mentioned here as the Q&A, it's totally fair game. Anything you want to ask me, there are a few things that I won't talk about that are personal, but when I get to those, I'll say, I'm not going to talk about that. That's personal. But when we get into what I can only term terrorist attacks, they are now so widespread. Let me look, because I listen to the first responder frequencies. I pay no attention whatsoever to any news source. They're all lying, right, including here in Lincoln. We had 2 nights of riots so far, and you would not know it if you watched our local press. And it's like that across the entire country, and it's like that with national news. It's awful out there. When I went, you can see it in my video, when I went, they were smashing I don't know if they caught it because I lost a chunk of the video because both my phone ran out of power at the time and it ran out of drive space. I am making that so that never happens again. But they had smashed the windows of buildings for a couple of blocks around. They had smashed the windows on, bus stops. And they kept closing in on the cops. They had a line of cops at the entrance to the city county building, and they kept closing in. The cops kept having to do tear gas. I caught some tear gas. It wasn't much, but what happened was I was pretty far away, but the wind happened to blow my way. Fortunately, sort of, one of the idiots had broken open a fire hydrant, and that was spraying out all over the place. But the impact was that it sprayed down right past me in the gutter. And I'm thinking, I don't care anymore. This is killing my eyes. I'm having a little hard time breathing. So I just said, screw this. And I went over to the, the water's pretty clean at this point. It's coming out. It washed everything away. I just went over to the gutter and was just like this, pouring things into my eyes out of the gutter. But that's how it was getting there. You had all this F the police and hands up, don't shoot, which of course is ridiculous. That's not actually what happened, but we don't know that because our press reported it that way. And once we found out the truth, they did not attempt to make any kind of retractions. Have I seen the George Floyd porno film on Pornhub? No, I have not gone to look at that. I'm not sure I'd care that much. It's interesting that he did it, but not, I don't think, particularly relevant to how he was murdered. He was murdered, in my opinion. Now, whether it had something to do with the prior relationship with that cop, because apparently they knew each other from having worked as like bouncers at the same nightclub or something, I have no idea whether those things are linked. I don't know. What I do know is you can look at the video and clearly see. See, from my perspective, I'm going to have a whole video about this tomorrow. As I say, I usually like to do genre-related stuff, but there are things I have to say that other people don't seem to be saying. And I'm going to have a whole video on that tomorrow about because I think there actually is a problem with policing in the U.S. right now, but it's not what everybody else thinks by any stretch of the imagination. If you were doing policing the way that I think it should be done, that would not have happened. It simply wouldn't have happened. You couldn't do it. It wouldn't have happened. Let's see. I've got to move this chat down to where I can see it a little better. Let's see. Kat Zingano of the UFC Fighter would be a great Batwoman. She's pretty physically fit and actually knows how to fight. Might even save some money on the stunt doubles. Maybe. I think that they definitely need somebody in Batwoman who is not skinny as a rail. I mean, they had to put Ruby Rose. Always, when she wasn't in the bat suit, they had to put her in oversized clothes, because if they put her in something that was tight, you would know that she's anorexic. She's like 5'8", and I have to say weighs about 97 pounds. And this is in taking into account that the camera adds 10 pounds. It looks like you're a lot bigger. I'm not that great in terms of that weight, but I look worse to you. The camera is adding more weight to me than I actually have. And Ruby Rose was just skinny as hell. And the only thing that I could say when I was watching those things is, oh, good, Ruby Rose is mixing it up again with some very accommodating stuntmen. Destroying public or private property is a violation of the... absolutely, it's a violation of the non-aggression principle. These people do not care about human life, but let alone George Floyd. It's just free stuff and a license to beat up decent people. Absolutely. Absolutely. It is just totally... And, I'm an anarcho-capitalist, right? But this is a kind of anarchy that nobody wants to see. Destroying our cities, major and minor cities. Hell, I was listening to the scanner frequencies, and they were having this in... Rapid City, South Dakota. I've spent a lot of time in Rapid City because I have a lot of relatives out there. And it's like it's a town of like 20,000. Its only thing going for it is right on the edge of the Black Hills, so it is kind of a tourist trap. But for them to have this, that's insanity. You know, you're into small towns now. I also looked. Mankato, Minnesota had it. St. Cloud, Minnesota had it. The Quad Cities, which is it's 4 small towns that are separated by the Mississippi River on the border of Iowa and Illinois. It's small. I've been through there. It's not, I mean, I don't know what the exact population is, but it's not a big area. And yet they were having this. It's everywhere. It is everywhere. It's insanity. Let's see. Drop Truth says George Floyd and Derek Chauvin worked at the same venue. Yeah, that bar. For a decade. They had been both found to be low-level Freemasons. It's orchestrated. Oh, I don't think this is orchestrated. Maybe there might be something about the murder that was, but the rest of this, there isn't. They're saying that it's Antifa behind it. I'm sorry. There are tens of thousands. There could be 100,000, all told, protesters, terrorists in the U.S. There is no way that you could get this to be orchestrated. I think it's just opportunist. They saw that they could get away with it in Minneapolis, and they said, "Oh, well, let's try it here. Let's loot and commit arson, armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, and attempted murder of innocents." Drop Two says, "Are the CW stunt people unionized? Amanda should sue them into the ground." I assume you're talking about Amanda Smith. I'll speak about her. I always do it towards the end of the episode. Amanda Smith should absolutely be suing them into the ground. I don't know. I assume that Canada has something like OSHA. If that had happened in the United States, it would be such a gigantic OSHA violation. She would be getting huge sums of money from AT&T for the rest of her fracking life. That she isn't getting any money from anyone is an absolute disgrace. Let's see. Drop Truth asks, did I watch the CW series Swamp Thing? I did not. I don't know. I don't know. I lost track of the CW shows. I don't remember. I was at first excited about Supergirl. And then I just, all of those shows do something that is just really annoying to me. And I understand I am not the target audience for it. The target audience is people in their early 20s. So all of those shows do something I find so irritating, which is they'll be in the middle of some kind of action, and then they just halt, they pull a break on the entire episode to talk about soap opera crap. And I hate it. It's one of the reasons that I like this series. It's not doing that. Yes, they have some of that, but it's not, constantly, it's not pull the brakes. Whoever's writing it is doing it a little better, and also the drama makes more sense to me. One of the reasons I like this thing. Drop a Suit said, Helen Slater will always be Supergirl. Oh, yeah, I agree. Supergirl from 1984 is a terrible film. It's a terrible film. I know it's a terrible film, but I still like it, kind of. I've thought over the years, why the hell do you like this film? It's really dumb. But I don't know. Maybe it's just that Helen Slater was pretty damn hot back then. Let's see. What about the mysterious pallets of bricks that have appeared in troublesome areas of protester site? Well, there have been some, and I think you could maybe, take that back and say, okay, Antifa are taking opportunity. They're saying, okay, we're starting to get these riots. Let's leave some bricks around. But it doesn't account for all of these things. Let me tell you right now, right this second, what's happening in terms of rioting. I do this by watching either broadcastify.com. Oh, God, yeah. See, I don't have didn't get the You didn't get the alerts because I turned it off for the show. But what's going on right now, but if you go to broadcastify.com, you can see what the top 50 are. And what Broadcastify does is it is a clearinghouse for streams that people have set up for their local first responders. This is the only way you should get your news, because you will hear stuff on there that the press will never tell you about. My biggest story about that was the 2016 Republican National Convention. The press was reporting that outside there were peaceful protesters, but I was hearing on the police frequency that people were going around and injecting people, including civilians and law enforcement, with a numbing agent. And that numbing agent sent some of them to the hospital because the numbing agent was affecting their hearts. And what did you hear out of the press? Crickets. That's what. They did not report it. And they had access to the exact same frequency. Those guys can go to Broadcastify like I do. Or this is what I actually do. And I hope this doesn't immediately start up. I use an application called Scanner Radio on my phone. And that will allow you to listen to just about any first responder frequency. I like to keep it around because sometimes stuff happens. While I was doing the review, 6 of those suckers would have blared at me if I hadn't turned off the alarm. If I'm sitting here right now, I have it turned on, and you hear a certain alarm, that means that the frequency has reached a threshold number of viewers, and it alerts me. So let me see what we've got here. The number one place in that's dealing with a terrorist attack tonight is New York City. Unsurprisingly, they've had stuff going on all for the last 24 to 48 hours. Then there's Boston. That's a new one. They're reported. Sometimes they'll take on these and they'll report exactly what's going on. Apparently 1,000 plus protesters are throwing battles at police cruisers, and emergency is needed for additional cruisers, unsurprisingly. For number 3, we have Buffalo. I've seen that one pop up, Buffalo, New York. Number 4 is Philadelphia. They have had ongoing terrorist attacks for at least 48 hours now. It has never stopped. They have been looting and arson and assault with a deadly weapon, robbery, armed robbery, and attempted murder of innocents. They've had that all along for the last 48 hours. So that one doesn't surprise me. Then you start to get into the Chicago frequencies. Oh my God, there's so many Chicago frequencies that are filled with, them talking about all of the terrorist activity they're having. And that's been going on for a good 24 to 36 hours. They have moved into the suburbs. You've heard these people say, we're going to move in and destroy the burbs next. Well, they have. They have moved into the eastern suburbs of Chicago. They haven't gotten, it's all very populated. It's populated a good 30 miles from the city limits, but they've moved into the suburbs. It's slow. I know where those suburbs are, but they have moved into them. Check La Mesa, California, a suburb of San Diego. I'll take a look at it in a second. Follow at 911 Breaking on Twitter. That's one thing you can do, but I really do like Scanner Radio because it's just constantly alerting me. Since this started last week, day and night, I have been constantly being alerted, and it must happen every 10 to 15 minutes. I will be surprised if talking to you, my alert does not go off here. Tanamel says the news outlet vilified the libertarian protests, asking for local businesses to be allowed to open. Now the looters are praised. COVID what? Yeah, we've stopped hearing about COVID. But that's because there are so many terrorist attacks. It's everywhere. And that's the reason that I say you can't really say that Antifa is behind it all, or that George Soros is behind it all. Maybe they have some places that they have, by virtue of opportunity, put bricks out, stuff like that. But there are tens of thousands, if not around 100,000 terrorists in all of these cities. And the sheer number You know, I mean, like in Lincoln, where I'm at, our terrorist attacks, there weren't any bricks around. Everybody was smashing these windows just with objects of opportunity. You know, rocks laying on the ground, stuff like that. These guys aren't being underwritten by Soros or something like that. There are simply too many of them. Simply too many of them. Let's see. Drop of truth. The easiest way to conquer New York City is to shut down the water treatment plants. Absolutely. And sewage transportation. They'd all drown and effluent within a week. Oh, yeah. Well, there's a million ways you can do it by shutting off all kinds of, stuff that they need in order to live. Chicago's best known for corrupt politicians, mafia, organized crime, and pizza. Obama isn't a pizza. Yeah, I learned a long time ago because I was a courier out of Chicago for several years, most of the time going to Toronto. But doing that and then visiting other cities, large cities, I became aware that cities have their own sort of character to them. And Chicago is and has always been kind of a rough town, which is why we're seeing a ton of terrorist activities with their frequencies right now. Here's again, after we get to Philadelphia, we get to Chicago Police Zone 1, District 12 and 14. That's not surprising me. God, it's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Fifth is Davenport and the Quad Cities. Again, small area right on the border of Illinois and Iowa. I mean, last place you would think something like this would happen. Then we have, again, another Philadelphia frequency, and then Cicero, which is a suburb of Chicago frequency. Then we have Dutchess, New York. I have no idea what that is. Suffolk County in New York. Not sure what's there, but must be something. Tinley Park, Orland Park in Illinois. Again, these are suburbs. Kenosha, Wisconsin, City Police and Fire. Oh, man. I don't know much about Kenosha. Then we have Macon County Sheriff in Illinois. It's Decatur. Oh, man. That's pretty far west. Man. I'm not going to ask, but you're getting out to where maybe even past where my ex currently lives. Then we have the Chicago Police Zone 1, Districts 16 and 17, Providence, Rhode Island, Peoria, Illinois. That's way south of Chicagoland. The Seattle Public Fire, Police and Fire. The note on that one is police and National Guard monitoring multiple protest groups in downtown Seattle. Protesters are attempting to access I-5. Police are working to deny access with rolling roadblocks. Probably thousands of people. Then we're off into, as I say, another one for Providence, Rhode Island. Is a different county, I think. Pitt, North Carolina. Know nothing about that. Solano, California. It is the Vallejo Police and Fire. Then we're into Sedgwick, Kansas. Again, not a big city. Sedgwick is pretty small. I've never been there. But the only real big city of note in Kansas is Kansas City, Kansas. St. Paul, Minnesota. What a shock. Massachusetts for the Boston metro area. Virginia Beach. Oh, my God. DuPage, Illinois. Oh, man. That's where Northern Illinois University is. I went to there. That is way far out west. Man, it's probably students. I bet it's students. But that's way far out west. That would be too close to comfort if I was my ex. What's after that? Then the Chicago Police again. That Chicago Police one, the one that's marked, if you look at broadcastify.com, they're top listeners. The Chicago Police one is one really interesting to listen to because that's their riot frequency. That's the one that they use for stuff exactly like this. Blazer 101. Bill, just wait when Trump wins in November. And am I related to Roger Stone? No, in no way. Yeah. Let me say something about Trump and all the rest of this in a second. So we have, again, the Allsup, Evergreen, and Oak Lawn police dispatches. That's suburban Chicago. Let's see. There's another Boston area one, large demonstration turning into riot at Franklin Park. In Dorchester, objects being thrown at officers. Cleveland, Lynchburg, Virginia, another Chicago one. Hillsborough, Florida. It just Grundy and Will counties in Illinois. Those are way west of Chicago again. Erie, New York. Clinton, Iowa. Back when I was an actor, I worked at Clinton, Iowa. There was a summer I did summer stock in Clinton, Iowa. I had a hit piece done on me by the local press. It's just one of the reasons I don't pay attention to the press. Oh my God, there isn't even students there. There's nothing there really. I mean, it's a basically there's a meat processing plant there. That's its whole thing. And I think the meat processing plant is shut down because of COVID. My God, I'm shocked by that. I'm really shocked by that one. Where was it? Clinton, Iowa, King County, Washington, another Chicago one. This one for Berwyn, which is a suburb. Lake, Indiana, just says Illinois numerous, and then northeast Will and southeast DuPage counties with municipal police and fire. I don't remember where in DuPage County Northern Illinois University is. I don't think it's. Let me think. There was another county not too far north of it. So northeast, Will, and southeast. So it's actually what's out there. There isn't much out there. Hi, let's talk Star Trek. Hi, I hate hearing bad crap. Illinois is your home. Oh, man, Illinois has so many riots and terrorist attacks going on right now. Let's see, Drop Truth asks, how has the lockdown affected the agricultural farmers and cattle breeders in the U.S.? We're watching right now because Nebraska is the vast majority of the land area is cattle ranchers because it is a natural prairie. However, half of our 2 million population all live in Omaha, Nebraska. And then you get to Lincoln, which is the second largest city at 340,000, including the suburbs, and then out to some smaller cities. And Omaha has had some serious trouble. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday, a local business owner defended himself from someone who was attacking him, shot him. The local police said, yeah, that was totally justified, and then they used it as another excuse for a riot. So, man, it's just horrifying out there. Supercruise63 said something, but redacted the message. Drop of the Zeus says, I read all of the Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter and Carson of Venus published, but hated the John Carter film. Yeah, have I seen it? Yes, I have. And believe it or not, my family owns first editions of those books. That's because my family, prior to my father's generation, were all cattle ranchers. And so out there, not far from, across the road, out in the middle of nowhere, was a one-room schoolhouse that was basically a large travel trailer. And in fact, the teacher lived in it. And there were just a ton of books in it, still are. And it's locked up so well that you can't get mice in or anything like that. We have first editions of all kinds of stuff. Somewhere around here in my collection, I have a first edition of The Beasts of Tarzan. It's amazing because it's really old, it's kind of worn and stuff, but it is a first edition one in hardback. But in terms of agriculture, we are seeing our agricultural industry, not just here but nationwide, collapse. Our cattle ranchers nationwide, what happened was they closed a whole bunch of the meat processing plants, which means, now let me explain how this goes. When you're doing beef, and that's what I know most about because I spent time on my grandparents' ranch when I was young, you have what's called a cow-calf operation. And a cow-calf operation is where you have a rancher that, breeds and raises cattle to a certain age. They free-range graze. Then from there, they sell them to stockyards, and that's because grass-fed cattle. It's going off. That's my alarm for this. We now have 2,613 people listening to the Davenport and Quad Cities metro area fire EMS. So I don't know what's going on with the Quad Cities. Good God, Anyway, you get from the cow-calf operation to a feedlot, and that's because cattle that are just grass-fed taste kind of stringy and tasteless. So what they do is they have them, instead of free-range grazing, they put them into a very, very large area, because there could be thousands of these things, and they feed them grain. And that makes their meat taste the way that consumers like it. And then from there they go to the meat processing plants, basically slaughterhouses. So the problem is the slaughterhouses closed down. Well, now your feedlot has nowhere to send their cattle. And now your ranchers don't have anywhere to send their cattle. And so they can no longer make their operating expenses, any of them, because the slaughterhouses are closed. So they end up culling their herds. They end up killing a bunch of them. And dairy farmers, they're dumping their milk because they have nowhere to send it. We are seeing the collapse of the agricultural industry in the U.S., and that has some really bad impacts if it isn't fixed very, very soon, because it could conceivably starve out America's cities. Doing this at all, doing any of these lockdowns, was a terrible idea. It has crashed our economy, put 40 million people on the dole. We're now approaching a great depression. I mean, we may be at Great Depression level of unemployment. And there's businesses that are closed down and will never come back. Lots of them here in Lincoln that will never come back because they couldn't make it. They have to have the income. And that means they had to let their employees go because they couldn't afford to pay them. They couldn't even afford to pay for where they're at, and their buildings. It is real bad. It is real bad. It was a bad idea to do it at all. Unfortunately, we should have just let this virus run its course. It may have caused more people to die, but when you look at the consequences of what happened, you may end up with more deaths because of those consequences than you did with the virus, Let me look here. Let's see. Edgar Rice Burroughs. Illinois is 2 states north and south of Springfield. Yeah, you always hear noises, because I lived in Chicagoland for about 10 years. You always hear noises about basically the rest of the state wanting to secede so that Chicago doesn't drag it down. Chicago's amazing. Right now, they're not even able to pay their lottery winners. The single easiest way for a state to make money, and they can't. They have to give them IOUs. That's how bad it is. They and California are neck and neck in a race to go completely bankrupt, and in Illinois it's because of Chicago. If the rest of the state just separated, they'd be in much better shape. And the rest of the state is largely rural as well. Let's see. Illinois, 2 states. Blazer 101 says, Bill, in New York, looters broke into the Rolex store and stole all the Rolex watches. I'm not surprised. They're smashing and looting everything, anywhere they are. What they're doing really is definable as terrorism by the textbook definition. I don't have it in front of me. Let me see if I can find it. Just read it to you, because you'll see what they're doing actually. Let's see, terrorism definition. The first definition: the use of violence or the threat of violence, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political goals. They are terrorists. They really are. They're terrorists, and they're all over the country. It is shockingly horrible. Supergrid63 said, if the mainstream media would quit victimizing criminals, this BS would not happen nearly as much. As I mentioned, they're not even covering it. They call them peaceful demonstrations. And even I look back at my last video where I went down to the riot in progress, well, the terrorist activity in progress here in Lincoln. You know, if I didn't tell people about it, they wouldn't know it happened. You know, the press isn't saying anything bad about it. They say peaceful protesters did this. No, man, you go down to that city county building, all the windows are smashed out from every building around. Again, when I was there, they had to deploy tear gas and flash bombs, and that was appropriate because if they hadn't, they would have been overrun. So it was insane, and it's that insane everywhere or worse. Let's talk. Star Trek says, I have a lot of family, your daughter also, in South Illinois, just near East St. Louis. Hate Cook County and what they've done to my state. Yeah. Chicagoland, as I say, they're in a neck-and-neck race because of Chicagoland. Illinois is a neck-and-neck race with California as to who goes bankrupt first. And then you and I are going to have to bail them out with our tax money. Tanamo says, free-range cattle, tastes really gamey. Can confirm. Yeah, nobody likes to eat it. I've had some, like one Christmas a long time ago when my grandparents were still alive. They gave each of the kids chunks of a cow that they had slaughtered, and those things, by the way, will last forever. I've hunted deer. You get that done at a good place. That lasts forever. You'd be amazed at how much meat comes onto 150 to 170 pound deer. Let's see. Artanamel says you can't go to work, but you can loot to your heart's content. Yes. Am I in Lincoln, Indiana? No, Lincoln, Nebraska. Nearly. I was just watching Stargirl. It is the same state in which Stargirl takes place. And in fact, they mentioned Lincoln tonight. And if the show keeps being pretty good, I'm going to, really lobby Stargirl to let me write an episode where she comes to Lincoln for some reason. I'd like to write it because I know the city and I know how to write that sort of thing. They probably won't do it, but they know it's there, and they've been very, very kind to us on the show. One of the things I really love about it, because usually we are the butt of a joke. They think of us as having weird Southern accents and just being complete hicks, and they are portraying small-town Nebraska life very, very accurately. They're being very, very accurate and kind to us. One of the many reasons I like this, but it's Lincoln, Nebraska that I live in. Supergood63 says, all of this because the media scaring the crap out of the people. I think the biggest thing that happened is they figured out they can do it. Minneapolis did nothing to get this under control the first 3 days. And then everybody said, oh, okay, we can do terrorist activities too. And then it just spread everywhere. There's no good reason for it anymore. None at all. George Lloyd's brother has said that his brother would be shocked and hate this. But it is no longer at all about the death of George Floyd. It is about just opportunistic criminal activity for the most part. Drop 2 says there's a lot of fear, Prawn, about the end of the beef in USA. Yes. Not just beef. I mean, it's happening in the dairy industry. It's happening with crops because, again, you got nowhere to sell them. And you have overhead, cattle in particular, and chickens, all of that, pork. You have overhead. You have to feed those things. They don't just feed themselves. You've got to buy things to feed them. And if you can't sell them, then you don't have any way to buy stuff for them. So you start killing them to the point where you have, a low enough stock that you can actually feed the damn things. And that has a lot of bad implications just in terms of human, what it could conceivably, not necessarily will, it depends on what happens, but what could conceivably, you could starve out America's cities. If it really falls apart, you can starve out America's cities in 3 days, because that's all the food that they have for the most part on the shelves. And in any case, if it looked like it was going away, you'd have rioting to the food riots. Let's see. Drop Truth says, tried wild boar in Brazil dishes. I'm very gamey, yeah. Blazer 101, but why, Bill, why? Because they can. It's one of my worries. It is one of my big worries, as the way things are now and how widespread the terrorist attacks are. I don't know what the hell you do about it. The only thing that I can think of is you call in the military, one of these places are multiple, and you kill people until the rest of them get the message and go home. I don't know what else you do. It is too widespread now. It's uncontainable. The only thing I can think of is shoot them until they stop. I don't know what the hell else you do. I don't know. And if Trump did that, obviously he'd get a ton of negative press. But given what's happening, I don't think Joe Average would say anything about it. I think they go, oh, okay, good. You're making where I live and work safe again. I think he could get away with it and still win the election. I think that's very possible. I am not a Trump supporter, per se. And I actually did once stump for the Libertarian candidate just a few weeks ago. And then she came out and was, basically the same thing. Oh, it's 400 years of, ingrained racism, blah, blah, blah. And I went, okay, Joe Jorgensen, screw you. And I am not supporting her anymore. I don't know who I'd support on the Libertarian side. I may just vote for Trump. Not because I'm necessarily in favor of his policies, but because I think the other side is far, far more evil and should never be allowed into power. Let's see. A couple of them here. Drop Truth, I think it's all the sage and nasty plants out here in Arizona, just nasty. Deer in Illinois tastes good. Not so much out there, yeah. My family still owns a piece of the cattle ranch that they used to have when my grandparents were alive. We go out there and hunt deer from time to time. They taste pretty good. Well, let's see. The javelin will knock over my trash and eat my children if they can. Chickens, sorry. Yeah. What I don't understand, Supercruise63 says, is why, as we cook our meat, doesn't meat kill viruses? Oh, yeah. Again, that's not the problem. The virus isn't the problem. The problem is they had to shut down a huge number of slaughterhouses because the virus went through it. In Nebraska, the largest area that had COVID for the longest time was not Omaha with 1 million people in it, wasn't Lincoln with 340,000 people in it. It was Grand Island, which is about 100,000. And the reason for that was they had a big a big meat processing plant there, and it went through some of the people who were there at the very beginning. So they closed down the meat processing plant. But by that time, so many people had it that it was getting out into the wild, and that's why it was the largest center for COVID for a while. I don't think that's the case anymore. I'd have to check. But for the longest time, they were like number one because of that. And that's not the only place. They've shut down a whole bunch of meat processing plants. In Sioux Falls, there's a meat processing plant that I've forgotten. I think it's responsible for like 5% of the world's pork closed. 5% of the world's pork, not the U.S.'s, because you see, a U.S. agricultural system feeds about 1 billion people worldwide because we are just that efficient anymore. Lots of science goes into that. People who work out there have spreads that are larger than either the New York City or Los Angeles metro areas. And, you have to have science to do that. And because we have science and all this heavy equipment that they use, we are so, we make so much food. We feed about 1 billion people in the world. Now, they can't make their operating expenses all the way down the line. And so they're having to euthanize cattle, dump milk, dump crops, because they can't sell them. There's no one to sell them to. And if that doesn't stop pretty damn quick, the implications are frankly biblical in nature. Let's see. Drop of Truth says martial law. We chatted about this on Twitter. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. Wouldn't have thought so until a couple of days ago, when I was shocked that my city had this, and then yesterday even more shocked that Rapid City, South Dakota. I mean, they got a couple of schools there. I assume it's they have an engineering school, and they have I think a teachers college or something like that. And there's a few others in the general area. But geez, Rapid City, South Dakota? What the frack? Drop 2 says the sad thing about all politics is that while the puppets may change, the puppeteers remain the same. Yeah, one of the reasons I'm a libertarian. You know, you vote for you vote out one power mad sociopathic narcissist, which they all are, and all you get is another power mad sociopathic narcissist. Tenenbaum, immigrants work there, and they live in very cramped quarters to save to bring their families over. No shade to immigrants; they work very hard, but that is the reality. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, regular immigrants, particularly. Well, God, IT, which I spent 40 years in, huge population of Pakistani and Indians, East Indians, and their work ethic is amazing. The rest of us who are born in the U.S. do not have that. Even in the Midwest, where we traditionally have a pretty good work ethic, it's nothing like those guys. It's amazing. But yeah, they're doing the same thing. Let's see. Drop 2 says China is currently threatening Australia with 80% tariff on barley. Have food exports ended in the USA? I don't know. I don't know where it's at. It hasn't. I don't think it's outright ended. It's just that the supply is constantly winnowing down the longer that we do anything with COVID. I sent a letter, an actual written paper letter, to my governor, and I said, we got to stop this. We got to quit doing it. We have to restart. We have to open everything back up, or this is going to be catastrophic for our beef industry. And I also told her that if, there's a chance that this could cause, more COVID. And I said, in that vein, if you wanted, I would go with you to a press conference where they would inject me with COVID. I put my money where my mouth is. If we're going to open it up and we think there's going to be more cases, inject me. Make me sick. I'll go for it, just so this opened up. And then I sent the same letter, but more tuned towards my city, to the mayor. And then I sent another letter, and basically identical to the one that I sent to the mayor, to my local city councilwoman. The same thing. We got to open up this city. We got to open up this state, or it's going to be disastrous. And then I said, and if it's really a problem, if you got press coming down on you about it, go to a press conference with me and infect me. Put my money where my mouth is. The virus spreads very quickly, but here in Nebraska, I haven't checked today, but here in Nebraska, I think we had about 1,000 cases, around 400 deaths. Here in Lincoln, we've got, I don't remember how many cases, but the last time I checked, 9 deaths. And we're not in lockdown. They just shut down all of our businesses and killed our economy. So here's what I think you need. I've looked at this, and here's what I think you need. You have to watch the vectors of infection. What is a direction from which these might get spread? I think what you need is at least an international airport in your state. So if you look at Colorado, which neighbors Nebraska, well, they have considerably more. It's not bad, but they have considerably more cases because they have an international airport, and Colorado Springs, all that U.S. Air Force stuff. So they have more cases. You look at you look at New York City. I mean, the population density is amazing, and they have harbors and docks and whatnot that nothing is tested for. And they have multiple international airports, and nobody is tested. So, of course, they're going to be gigantic. They're going to have a huge, gigantic number of infections. But when you get down to places like Nebraska, no international airport, landlocked state. And the nearest international airport is either O'Hare or Denver. Actually, O'Hare is closer. O'Hare is a closer international airport. So, we have few number of cases because of that. But we can't let this happen anymore. If people get it, people get it. But we're looking at something that if that ag industry really fails, it is biblical in terms of the number of people who would starve. And that includes just about everybody in our major cities. I would think that if you were in a city, if you were in a town, weren't in a town of 20,000 or less, that was immediately adjacent to agricultural land, if the ag industry fails, you'll starve. And the reason that you need to be immediately adjacent to agricultural land is so that you can go out and work these spreads, because ultimately there would be no gas. And there'll be nothing to fuel these, giant machines that we need in order to keep up our productivity. And so they'll need human beings to do it. I would almost see a return to kind of a serfdom, where you have a big landowner who owns all this stuff, and you get to, farm or ranch a piece of it, and then give some of your money over to the landowner. I could see something feudal like that. I hate it, but that's what I could see. Bill, why would you sacrifice yourself? Because I think if I'm going to say that we need to open this stuff up, even though we, it might cause more cases, I got to be patient zero. I got to be the guy that gets infected. I can't just say this and say, oh, well, more people might get infected. I say, I'll go for it. I'll volunteer to be the guy that goes for it. It's my idea. I get to go. That would be my thing. Do I remember when farmers under the Carter administration, they persuaded greedy farmers to expand the land by at least 300% and gave them no interest loans? Well, I was very young in the Carter administration, so I don't really remember much of anything about it. My political memory begins with Nixon, and really beyond that, I'm not familiar. Let's see. Drop 2 says then they bought out land in India for pennies, took over the Caterpillar and John Deere machinery, and sold it back to the USA, cheaper than it could be produced in the U.S. Yeah, well, we've been losing anything like manufacturing for a very, very long time. So, 83% of Arizona infections came directly from New York, or secondary infections from someone who came from New York. Yeah, and that's the other thing. 2-3 generations ago, people living here would have relatives, back east. That doesn't happen anymore. We're now relatively isolated in terms of that. We don't. Some people have relatives other places, but it's not common to go back east to see your parents or whatever. The families are now embedded in here. Dropper 2 says every rich person seeks to be Pharaoh. Yeah, well, no question about that. I think if it goes down okay, the rich people are the only ones going to be for sure having jobs. Not that I have anything against rich people. Don't get me wrong. As long as you're, acquiring your fortune ethically, I have no problem with that. And most of them do. It's just that when we get into like 41, 42 million people out of work, that's a number that people look at. But that is 41 followed by 6 zeros. And we only have 320 or so million people in the U.S. So, 40K out of 320 is 40 out of 320 is a massive number. Massive number. Rich is the case means multi-billionaire these days. It does, yeah. Well, robots and 3D printing. Why would the elite need serfs? Well, what I'm talking about is if the agricultural industry failed. You would have these people who owned very large spreads, but they were no longer able to actually farm or ranch it. So if you're in a town of lower than 20,000 or lower, you would be in a position to essentially go out and what amounts to lease the land. The rancher can't deal with it. They just own all this land. So your family could go out there and have a chunk of land that you were going to be doing stuff with, but you get to pay the guy who actually owns the land. It is sort of feudal. That's what a feudal system is. You have and they originally feudals, but you have the lord who owned all this estate, and then you'd have basically serfs who ran it. If the ag industry actually collapsed, I think you'd see that landowners would make out well, and the people in smaller towns would make out okay, but people in large cities are debtors, period. Let's see. If you become a multimillionaire off the taxpayers, there is a problem. Oh, yeah. All of our politicians in Washington, for example, yeah. They're horrible. They're just plain horrible. Their whole deal is that they've got control of the purse strings, and that's what they use in order to assert some level of control over the populace. Absolutely. Feudal is pretty much sharecropping. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. It would be sharecropping. You'd get landowners who owned all this big chunks of land, and then people who had to come out and sharecrop it. I think that's probably right. Bernie Sanders, feudal society is slavery. Yeah. The implications of the agricultural system in the U.S. failing are literally biblical in terms of what it would do. It would probably starve at least 1 billion people in the world. That is what the possibilities are. So listen, I tell you what, I have been on here for 2 hours, 15 minutes. So let me see if I can sign off for tonight. Again, I'm going to have a pre-recorded video tomorrow that's going to talk about the police, because I'm never going to excuse what's going on with these terrorist activities, but I think there are some things you could do that would make it so that the police were a little different than the way they are now, and maybe you wouldn't have such a strong-arm approach. So I'm going to talk about that tomorrow in a pre-recorded video. Drop2 says you cannot own land in the UK. You can lease it for up to 99 years. And, I appreciate that very much, Blazer 101. Again, my channel, just so you're aware, my channel tends to be largely about science fiction, fantasy, superhero, stuff like that. I'm doing these watch parties every week for Stargirl because they tended to work out well when I was doing it for Batwoman. The difference between is Batwoman's terrible and this show's pretty good. I'm gonna take it off here. So let me take you out with this. It isn't related really specifically to Stargirl. When I get into these superhero ones in the CW, I have to always relate what happened on Batwoman, the modern day Plan 9 from outer space. Batwoman's production staff is so completely incompetent that not only did it send Ruby Rose into surgery to prevent being paralyzed, it actually caused a production assistant, Amanda Smith, to become paralyzed. She's paralyzed from the waist down because of their incredibly bad practices. I've discussed it in another video called Batwoman Production Assistant Paralyzed Defends the Rescue, link below. As far as I know, not the CW, it's AT&T, because they own DC Comics now. DC Comics itself, nor the Batwoman production staff are paying one thin dime for Amanda Smith. She has massive expenses, and I just ask you if you would please donate to the Amanda Smith Rehabilitation Fund. That is gofundme.com/F/Amanda-Smith-Rehabilitation-Fund. And there's a link to it below, and you may have seen it scrolling past on my lower third from time to time. Miss Batwoman? Oh, yeah, shoot her in the face. There's no armor there. Yeah, they had that big subtitle thing, that big plot going on about how to kill Batwoman. Like, aim for this part. Aim for this, Anyhow, and closing, as it has been requested by a viewer and a fellow Fandai master, I might say, I am going to give you some cake. Because here at Tales from SYL Ranch, we do what we must because we can for the good of all of us, except the ones who are dead. But there's no use crying over every mistake. You just keep on trying until you run out of cake. and the science gets done, and you made a great gun for the people who are still alive. And that is all that I have to say about that. I would certainly love to keep the conversation going, so please leave your comments, questions, and nasty remarks, and I'll do my best to respond to you. So thanks for watching. Please donate to the Amanda Smith Rehabilitation Fund. So join me next week and tomorrow for a pre-recorded video, but for this stream, join me next week at the same star time and the same star channel for an episode of Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And I'm Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.